Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today, we're really digging into something big. We're taking on one of the oldest, maybe one of the most unfair stereotypes in ancient history.
You're talking about the Celts.
Exactly. The Celts, often just painted as, these disorganized, screaming barbarians running around in furs.
Right, that Roman propaganda. It stuck around for, what, 2,000 years?
It really has. But today, we're diving deep into the actual evidence. Stuff that shows the Celts, especially back in the first millennium BC, were actually right there, right on the edge of high culture across Europe.
And there's so much new evidence now. The last few decades, honestly, with advances in archaeological science. Things like high-precision dating, forensic analysis, it just exploded what we know.
So we can finally offer you, the listener, a clearer picture, a synthesized understanding of this huge force in ancient Europe.
That's the goal. Our mission today is really to cut through that Roman bias, use these new findings, and understand how the Celts built a society that was, well, technologically advanced, had these massive trade networks.
And militarily. Pretty formidable, right? Enough to pull off maybe the biggest humiliation in ancient history, sacking Rome itself.
Absolutely. But first, let's get a handle on the scope here. Because when we say Celtic, it's not like talking about Egypt or Rome, is it? Not one single empire.
No, it's more complex than that.
Much more. It's really a term for a whole variety of peoples, tribes, languages, phenomena even. They share deep cultural links, sure, through trade, maybe religion, definitely military styles. But politically, very different.
And the sheer size of their world. It's kind of mind-boggling when you map it out.
It is immense. I mean, think about it. You've got Ireland and Britain way out west, then all across Gaul, that's modern France, pushing down into Spain, across the Alps.
Even further east?
Oh, yeah. All the way into Anatolia, what's now Turkey. You find the Galatians there culturally. They're Celtic. It's this vast continental footprint. For a good while, they were really the dominant cultural force in non-Mediterranean Europe.
Okay, that sounds like a superpower to me. But how did they keep that influence if they weren't, all united under one banner?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the core of the complexity. Our sources, even filtered through Romans like Livy, they suggest these tribes were fiercely independent, often fighting each other, actually, squabbling over land, resources. But there's this pattern you see again and again. When a big external threat showed up, especially Rome, later on they could, and often did, band together. They'd form these temporary but really powerful federations.
So that shared culture, that Celticness, was strong enough to make them cooperate when things got serious?
It seems so. Strong enough to overcome those local rivalries when their survival was really on the line.
Okay, so this isn't just digging up old history. It's kind of a shortcut, isn't it, to understanding this huge, influential power in ancient Europe that wasn't Greek or Roman. We need to know who they were.
How they lived, why they moved, exactly.
Right. And speaking of moving, let's talk about that push south, towards Italy. For ages, the Alps were the big barrier, yeah.
Massive barrier. A natural wall between the north, with its own trading cultures, and the south, where you had the Etruscans, the early Romans.
Contact was pretty limited then, just traders going back and forth, maybe some essentials like copper, tin heading south.
Pretty much wine, maybe some fancy pottery heading north. Kind of equilibrium. But that all changes dramatically around the 5th century BC.
How so?
Suddenly, you see Celts crossing the Alps, not just as traders, but in large groups, settling down, taking over the Po Valley, what the Romans later called Cisalpine Gaul. Gaul on this side of the Alps.
And we don't really know why they made such a big move, because they didn't write it down themselves.
Precisely. No Celtic written records from that time explaining the push. So we're left with, well, speculation based on archaeology and later accounts.
Okay, so what are the theories? You've got the practical ones, I suppose.
Right. Things like maybe recurring hunger, climate shifts leading to crop failures, maybe just population pressure, too many people, not enough land. Basic stuff forcing people to look for new homes.
Makes sense. But then there's the Roman version.
Ah, yes, the Roman spin. Titus Livy is the main source here, writing much later, remember. He suggests the Celts were basically just drawn south by, quote, the good life.
The good life, meaning?
Meaning the wine, the food, the fertile Italian soil. He paints it as this almost childlike desire for ease and riches. Opportunism, really. It implies they lack discipline or any strategic thought.
Which, conveniently for Rome, fits their later narrative. We had to civilize these people who just wanted our stuff. It kind of downplays any real need the Celts might have had to move.
Exactly why we need to lean on the archaeology where we can. It gives us a different view, a non-Roman one. And a fantastic place for that is Valcamonica, up in northern Italy.
Ah, Valcamonica. That place is incredible. It's like an open-air library carved in rock.
It really is. It's this long valley, about 70 kilometers, in Lombardy. And crucially, it sits right at the end of an ancient alpine trading route. It's been a UNESCO site since '79 for a reason.
Because of the rock carvings, the Felds builder.
Tens of thousands of them. Over 200,000 discovered thanks to archaeologists like Alberto Marietta. And these carvings aren't just from one period. They span millennia. They literally document the whole worldview of the people using this mountain pass.
So what do they tell us about the specific moment, the Celts arriving? Do they show up in the pictures?
They do.
Yeah.
The local people, the community who gave the valley its name, they carved themselves, their warriors, their animals, their symbols. And then you start to see depictions of newcomers, people with different styles of weapons, different symbols, recognizably Celtic.
So it wasn't just a quick invasion then, it shows interaction.
Exactly. Protracted contact,
Great.
trade, exchange of ideas. It paints a picture of encounter, not just conquest, happening long before the big military clashes down south. It's a window into their beliefs, their society, all without that later Roman filter.
It's such a vital counter-narrative, showing complexity, not just chaos, but, well, even complex cultures clash, don't they? Interests diverge. And that brings us to the big one, the event that really cemented the Celts as Rome's great nemesis, the sack of Rome.
Right. This kicks off around 390 BC. Now, for the blow-by-blow, we're pretty reliant on Livy again, written, 300 years after the fact?
So grain of salt needed. He's writing Roman history for Romans.
Absolutely. But he tells us about this huge Celtic army, probably a mix of tribes heading south under a leader named Brennus.
And their first target wasn't actually Rome, was it?
No, initially it was Clusium, a wealthy Etruscan city in modern Tuscany. The Celts besieged it. And the Etruscans, frankly terrified by these warriors who were unlike anyone they'd faced, they sent messengers pleading to Rome for help.
Rome at this point, still just a regional power, right? Ambitious, sure, but focused on central Italy, not yet the big empire.
Exactly. And the Roman Senate, they made a really bad call. Hubris, basically. They looked at these Gauls, as they called them, and thought, disorganized rabble, no serious threat, big mistake.
So instead of sending troops, they sent diplomats.
A small delegation. Livy says it was 3 brothers from the Fabii family. Their job was just to check things out, maybe talk the Celts into leaving Clusium alone. Peaceful solution preferred.
And it all went wrong.
Spectacularly wrong. The talks just failed. Celts wanted land, wealth, not diplomacy. And then one of the Roman envoys did something unthinkable. During a fight outside the city walls, one of the Fabii brothers actually killed a Celtic chieftain.
While acting as a diplomat, that's a massive breach of protocol, even by ancient standards, a declaration of war almost.
It absolutely was. A huge offense against honor and diplomatic immunity.
Yeah.
And here's where Livy, maybe unintentionally, gives us this fascinating detail. He actually reports that the barbarian Celts initially reacted with more restraint than the civilized Romans.
How so?
Brennus was smart. He didn't just fly off the handle. He held his warriors back. Instead of immediate attack, he sent envoys to Rome demanding justice, demanding they hand over the Fabius brother who committed the murder.
And Rome refused.
Worse than refused. They doubled down on the arrogance. According to Livy, they refused to surrender Fabius, and, get this, they actually made him a military tribune for the year.
Wow. Okay, that's a slap in the face.
A massive insult. For Brennus, that was it. No more negotiation. Full vengeance required. And the target instantly switched. Forget Clusium, right? Now it was Rome itself.
Which leads directly to the Battle of the Alia, just north of Rome. July 18th, 387 BC. The Romans must have been reeling, betrayed by their own envoys' actions.
Totally caught off guard. They had to scramble an army together. But this was the old Roman army, remember. Citizen soldiers, mostly small farmers, pulled from their fields for the campaign. Not a professional standing army. They weren't ready, mentally or militarily.
And they were up against Brennus's force, who were probably battle-hardened from their push south.
Definitely. And the Romans made some terrible tactical mistakes at the Alia River. They were worried about being outnumbered or outflanked, so they stretched their line really thin, trying to cover too much ground.
Weakening the whole front.
Exactly. And crucially, they put their newest, least experienced troops on the right flank, which also the most vulnerable position.
Did Brennus see that?
Instantly. He didn't just charge the center like maybe the Romans expected. He focused his main assault on a small hill where the Roman cavalry and reserves were positioned. He smashed them, routed them completely.
And once that flank collapsed?
The whole line just disintegrated, especially those raw recruits on the right. It wasn't even a battle, it was a rout. Panic set in.
Livy mentions the sheer terror, doesn't he?
He does. He says fear completely dominated their minds. They weren't thinking about regrouping, just fleeing. Many didn't even run back towards Rome. They just scattered, many across the Tiber River, abandoned the city.
An incredibly swift victory for the Celts, and Rome was basically undefended.
Utterly defenseless. But that speed, the way the Celtic charge, just shattered the Roman line. We need to pause and ask, how? How did they do that? It wasn't just screaming in numbers.
It comes back to their technology, doesn't it? And organization. That barbarian label just falls apart when you look closely.
Completely. Which brings us to their real ace in the hole, their metalworking, the Celtic blacksmith. We have stunning evidence from places like Champagne in France, from elite warrior graves around 300 BC.
What do those graves show?
They're like time capsules, full of high-status goods. You find things like fibulae, those ornate brooches decorated with coral. Coral from the Mediterranean. That tells you about their trade networks reaching far south.
But the weapons themselves, the iron.
That's where the genius lies. The Celts mastered iron production when many others in Europe were still reliant on bronze or using lower quality iron. These weren't crude clubs. The swords are typically short, double-edged, designed for infantry fighting up close, lethal.
So what was different about their iron? What was the secret?
It's all about dealing with the problems of early iron smelting. You make iron back then in what's called a bloomery furnace, a renifin. It doesn't get hot enough to truly melt the iron like modern steel making.
So you end up with impurities.
Exactly. Bits of charcoal, slag, trapped inside the iron bloom. If you just hammer that out into a sword, it's brittle, unreliable. It might snap at the worst possible moment.
So the Celtic blacksmiths figured out how to get that stuff out.
And more. They developed this incredibly labor-intensive process. You take the iron bar, you heat it, you split it, you fold it over, you hammer weld it back together. And you do this again and again and again, hundreds of times.
Like folding dough for pastry almost, creating layers.
That's a great analogy. Each fold, each weld, each hammering squeezes out more impurities. And, crucially, it distributes the carbon content more evenly throughout the metal.
Creating a kind of ancient steel.
Effectively, yes. A composite structure. This process gave the blade two vital qualities that seemed contradictory. It was hard enough to take and hold a razor-sharp edge, and it wouldn't bend easily on impact. But it was also flexible enough not to shatter. It could absorb shock.
That's a serious advantage on the battlefield.
A fundamental advantage. This superior iron technology is deeply linked with the Celts' rise. It gave them military dominance for centuries. You see the result at battles like the Allia.
But it wasn't just better swords. They also used sound, didn't they? Psychological warfare.
Oh, yes. The technology of terror. And their prime instrument for that was the carnix.
The war trumpet. I've seen reconstructions. They look terrifying. Like these giant bronze dragon heads on poles.
Exactly. Usually an animal head, boar, wolf, serpent capping this long vertical bronze tube, maybe 3 meters high. We don't have any perfectly complete ones, but from fragments and Roman depictions, we know what they look like and, crucially, how they sounded.
How did they make the sound? Like a modern trumpet?
The basic principle, yes. Vibrating the lips into a mouthpiece. But the design was different. The sound wasn't just blasted forward. That big bronze head acted as a resonator, amplifying the sound almost circularly.
And in the ancient world, that must have been overwhelming.
Think about it. It was a much quieter world. The loudest sounds were maybe thunder, waves crashing, or mass human screams. Then imagine dozens of these carnix horns starting up together.
Deafening.
Absolutely deafening, drowning out everything else, sounding like thunder or some monstrous animal roaring. It wasn't just noise, it was acoustic assault.
And visually, too, seeing those things looming up.
Imagine you're a Roman farmer soldier. It's dawn, fog on the field. And suddenly, out of the mist, loom these 3-meter-tall, snarling bronze beasts held high. It makes the warriors carrying them seem like giants. It's sensory overload. Sight and sound combine to turn fear into absolute panic.
Which sounds exactly like what happened at the Allia.
It fits perfectly. Advanced weapons and calculated psychological shock. This wasn't random savagery. It was sophisticated warfare.
Okay, so that level of technology, that kind of organization, that requires resources. It requires wealth, which takes us away from the battlefield and towards their economy. Where did the money come from?
A lot of it came from controlling key resources and trade routes. And the poster child for early Celtic economic power has to be Hallstatt.
Hallstatt in Austria. Famous for salt, right? Ancient salt mines.
Ancient and massive. Salt mining goes back maybe 7,000 years there. But during the Hallstatt period, proper the early Iron Age, This was industry on an almost unbelievable scale.
How big are we talking?
We're talking mining chambers, deep underground, that are like subterranean cathedrals. Archaeologists have found rooms 200 meters long, 20 meters high, 15, 20 meters wide. You could fit houses inside these spaces, dug out by hand.
By hand? How did they even do that?
Brutally hard work, but a simple technique, often two-man teams. One guy holds a bronze or early iron pick against the rock salt face. The other guy hits the back of the pick with a heavy wooden mallet or flail. Over and over.
Slow progress, surely.
Incredibly slow. They estimated it took a team about a month of constant work just to dig 1 meter deeper into the tunnel.
Think about the organization needed to manage thousands of miners, keep them fed, housed, paid. It's staggering for that period. And the salt itself was valuable.
Hugely valuable. Salt was white gold, essential for preserving food, especially meat and fish, before refrigeration. And the Hallstatt miners produced these distinctive heart-shaped salt cakes. It was like their brand. If you saw that shape south of the Alps, you knew you were getting the good stuff from Hallstatt.
And the mines themselves preserve things incredibly well, don't they, because of the salt?
The preservation is almost perfect. Salt just sucks the moisture out of everything organic. So they found things like miners' leather backpacks, woolen textiles, wooden tools, even food scraps.
Like what?
Perfectly preserved bean pods, millet grains, things that would normally rot away in centuries. And famously, they found human excrement, perfectly preserved for 2,500 years.
Wow. Okay, not glamorous, but incredibly useful for archaeology, right? Tells you about their diet.
Exactly. Tells you what they ate, what parasites they had. And they say when they moisten these samples for analysis, they still smell. It's an unbelievable snapshot of daily life.
The burials near Hallstatt also tell stories, right? About the people.
Yes. The cemetery associated with the mines is huge and spans centuries. Skeletal analysis shows the toll the work took. You can see differences based on gender roles.
How so?
Women's skeletons often show changes related to carrying heavy loads unevenly, probably on one shoulder, maybe hauling salt out or supplies in. Men's skeletons show stress patterns in the shoulders and arms, consistent with that repetitive striking motion of mining.
It paints a picture of a tough life, but an organized one.
Very organized. And the richness of the graves shows the wealth generated. Hallstatt was so important, so defining for its time, roughly 800 to 400 BC, that it gave its name to an entire period of European history, the Hallstatt period. It marks the real beginning of the Iron Age in this part of Europe. You see the transition right there in the graves, from bronze goods to mostly iron.
And all that salt, all that wealth that had to travel, how did they move goods?
Rivers were key, the ancient highways. But the Celts also seem to have developed extensive overland road networks. Some research suggests many modern roads in Europe still follow ancient Celtic routes. They were connected.
How far did these connections go?
Pretty much across the known world at the time. We know there was intense trade across the English Channel, for instance. Tin and copper from Britain, vital for bronze making, were traded for finished goods from the continent.
And all this trade, this wealth, led to the rise of powerful centers.
Exactly. You start to see these fortified settlements emerging, often on hilltops. The Germans called them Fürstensitz, the princely seats. Places like If, or especially Heuneburg on the Swabian Alb in southern Germany.
These weren't just villages.
Oh, no. These were proto-urban centers, maybe thousands of people living there. They were strategically located to control trade routes. They housed the elite, the artisans, the merchants. They were hubs of power and commerce.
And they looked impressive. You mentioned Heuneburg's walls.
Heuneburg, particularly in the 6th and 5th centuries BC, was clearly built to impress. Its main fortification wasn't a simple wooden palisade. It was a massive wall built of mud bricks on a stone foundation with towers, following a Mediterranean style.
Imported architecture.
Absolutely. A deliberate choice to show off their connections, their sophistication, their ability to command resources and knowledge from the south. It was power architecture, like seeing skyscrapers for the first time, maybe, for people arriving there.
And there was competition between these centers.
Seems likely. Sometimes probably peaceful trade competition. Other times maybe military conflict between these powerful federations or chiefdoms, all vying for control of the flow of goods.
What kind of goods are we finding at places like Heuneburg that show these connections?
The finds confirm it was a major international hub. You get amber, clearly from the Baltic Sea region way to the north, coral, which we mentioned from the Mediterranean, high-quality Greek pottery. It's a crossroads.
Even the food supply was international. You mentioned pig bones.
Yeah, that was fascinating research. They did isotope analysis on pig bones found at Heuneburg. Strontium isotopes, again, like we'll discuss later for humans. It tells you where the animal grew up based on the geology.
And the pigs weren't local.
Many of them weren't. They came from the southern Black Forest area, quite a distance away. That implies a really organized system for provisioning the settlement. The elite at Heuneburg were drawing resources from a wide region, not just their immediate backyard.
That level of wealth and connection leads us perfectly to one of the most incredible finds recently, the so-called Princess of Heuneburg.
Ah, yes, the grave near the Heuneburg. A truly stunning discovery. It started almost by accident in 2005. A farmer's plow snagged a gold fibula, a brooch. That led archaeologists to investigate, and they found an unlooted, incredibly rich burial chamber.
But it was in a dangerous spot, waterlogged.
Exactly. The site was in a floodplain, very wet and prone to collapsing. Excavating it traditionally on site would have been risky, potentially destructive, so they made a bold decision.
The Blockbergern.
The block recovery. They decided to lift the entire burial chamber and the soil surrounding it out in one massive block. We're talking about 80 tons of earth and archaeological material.
How did they even do that?
With heavy machinery, steel plates driven underneath. It was a major engineering feat. They encased the whole thing and transported it 120 kilometers away to a specialized lab in Ludwigsburg.
So they could excavate it under controlled conditions.
Precisely. Slowly, carefully, layer by layer. And that decision paid off hugely because the waterlogged conditions had preserved organic materials remarkably well, including the wooden structure of the burial chamber itself.
Oak and fir planks, right. Even the bark was still there.
Perfectly preserved.
Yeah.
And that wood held the key to dating it. They could use dendrochronology.
Tree ring dating. Explain that quickly for us.
Okay, so trees in the same region develop a unique pattern of growth rings each year. Wider rings in good years, narrower in bad years. It creates a kind of natural barcode over time. If you have preserved wood, you can match its ring pattern against a master sequence for that region.
And it gives you an exact year.
If you're lucky and have enough rings, including the outer bark edge, yes. And they were incredibly lucky. They could date the felling of the trees used to build that chamber to exactly 583 BC. An absolute date. Just amazing.
And inside, who was buried there?
An adult woman, laid out with incredible wealth. Stunning gold jewelry, amber, bronze ornaments. And interestingly, some of her jewelry showed strong stylistic parallels to items found in a nearby, slightly earlier child's grave, suggesting maybe a mother-daughter relationship, or at least close family connection within this elite lineage.
But the style of her best stuff, the gold jewelry, it caused a stir, didn't it?
It really did. Because stylistically, it just didn't look local. It wasn't typical for the Swabian Alb region at that time. The craftsmanship was absolutely top tier, but the design influences seemed foreign.
Foreign how?
Experts suggested the goldsmith who made it must have been trained far away, maybe in Etruscan Italy, or possibly even the Iberian Peninsula. Her jewelry was incredibly fashionable, totally up to date with the luxury styles you'd see among noble women in the Mediterranean world.
So the immediate thought was, she must be a foreigner, right? A princess from the south, maybe married into the Heuneburg dynasty to seal an alliance or trade deal.
That was the logical conclusion, based purely on the art history, on the style of the objects. It made perfect sense. She brings this sophisticated southern taste with her.
But science had a surprise in store.
A big one. They decided to test her origins directly, using strontium isotope analysis on her teeth.
Okay, explain strontium again. How does that tell you where someone grew up?
Right, strontium is an element present in rocks and soil everywhere. But the ratio of its different isotopes varies geographically depending on the local geology. As you grow up, you absorb strontium from the food you eat and the water you drink, which comes from that local environment.
And get locked into your teeth.
Into your tooth, enamel specifically. Enamel forms during childhood and doesn't change afterward. So the strontium signature in your enamel acts like a permanent geological fingerprint of where you spent your early years.
So they tested her tooth enamel. What did they find? Was she Italian? Spanish?
The results were absolutely clear, unequivocal. Her strontium isotope signature perfectly matched the geological signature of the Heuneburg region itself.
Wow. So she wasn't a foreigner at all?
Not a bit. She was, as the researchers put it, a genuine Swabian. Born and raised right there.
That completely flips the script, doesn't it?
It fundamentally changes how we see her and her society. Her super fashionable, internationally styled jewelry wasn't something she brought with her. It was something she or her family acquired.
Which tells you, what about Heuneburg's power?
It tells you that the local elite, ruling from these furstensitz, had such wealth and such extensive trade connections that they could access and purchase the absolute best, most desirable luxury goods from anywhere in the known world, from the Baltic to the Mediterranean. They didn't need to import a foreign princess to get foreign styles. They had the buying power right there.
That's a huge takeaway for understanding Celtic society. Local power, global reach.
Precisely. And that power, that status, they wanted to protect it even in death, which is partly why you see these massive burial mounds, tumuli, built over rulers like her.
Protection from grave robbers.
That's certainly part of it, but some scholars also suggest a deeper, maybe ritualistic reason. There might have been a belief that certain powerful dead people could be dangerous, that they might return as, well, revenants, maybe. Wiedergänger is the German term. So the mound physically keeps them in their place, protecting the living.
Fascinating. Okay, let's loop back south then. Back to Rome and the aftermath of the Battle of the Allia. Brennus has won, the road is open.
He marches the 16 kilometers or so to Rome, finds it mostly deserted. As we said, many Romans had fled, totally demoralized. Those who remained, soldiers and some civilians, were treated to the best defensive position, the Capitoline Hill, the ancient citadel.
Brennus occupies the rest of the city, and this is where Livy gives us that famous, maybe slightly embellished story about the old senators.
Right. The story goes that the elderly, high-ranking senators decided they wouldn't flee. They put on their formal robes, sat on their traditional ivory chairs in the entrances of their homes in the Forum, waiting with stoic dignity.
As if to face death honorably.
Exactly. And when the first Celtic warriors entered the Forum, they supposedly paused, awestruck. Maybe thinking these silent, immobile figures were statues or even gods.
But the calm didn't last.
No. According to the story, one Gaul reached out, maybe curiously, and stroked the long beard of one senator, Marcus Papirius. Papirius, insulted, struck the Gaul with his ivory staff.
And that broke the tension.
Shattered it. The Celts erupted in violence. They massacred the senators right there. Then they went on a rampage, looting the houses, killing anyone they found, and then systematically they started setting fires.
Yeah.
Rome burned.
While the survivors watched from the Capitol, helpless.
Imagine the scene. Their city being destroyed below them. It led to a siege. A long one.
How long do they hold out on the Capitol?
About 7 months, the sources say. It was a brutal stalemate. The Romans up on the hill were slowly starting. Supplies ran out. Down in the city, the Celts were suffering too.
From what?
Disease, mainly. Occupying a sacked city in the heat of Italian summer. Rome was marshy in places back then. Malaria, dysentery would have run rampant. Plus hunger, thirst. Conditions were terrible for both sides.
So eventually, someone had to break the deadlock.
Yes, negotiations started. The Celts, probably weakened by disease and wanting to leave with their loot before losing too many men, agreed to withdraw. But for a price.
A ransom for the city.
A huge one.
Yep.
1,000 pounds of gold. An enormous sum for Rome at that time. Somehow the Romans scraped it together, maybe from temple treasuries, private wealth. They brought it down from the capital.
But there was one final insult to come. During the weighing,
The infamous moment. They set up the scales to weigh out the gold. The Romans put their gold on one side. The Celts put weights on the other. But the Romans realized the Celts were using rigged weights heavier than standard. They were being cheated.
they protested.
Of course. The Roman tribune in charge complained bitterly, and that's when Brennus delivered the final humiliation. He contemptuously drew his heavy iron sword, tossed it onto the scale on the side with the weights, adding its considerable weight to the ransom demand.
And uttered those words.
Ve vixis, woe to the vanquished, basically saying, we won, you lost, we make the rules now, suffer.
That phrase must have burned into the Roman psyche for generations.
It absolutely did. It symbolized the absolute depth of their defeat and humiliation, their city sacked, their pride destroyed, dictated to by barbarians they had underestimated. It was a massive setback for Rome's ambitions in Italy.
But paradoxically, maybe also the making of them.
That's the truly astonishing part when you look at the long arc of history, how quickly Rome not only recovered but learned from this disaster. That wasn't the end of Rome. Far from it.
You see it as a turning point.
In many ways, yes. It was an incredible shock to their system, a wake-up call. It forced Rome to confront the fact that their traditional military system, the citizen militia of farmers, just wasn't good enough anymore. Not against an enemy as sophisticated and mobile as the Celts.
So Ve Victis forced them to change.
It seems it catalyzed a fundamental rethink. Over the following decades and centuries, Rome undertook the long, hard process of military reform. They professionalized the army, developed new tactics, like the manipular legion, improved equipment, logistics. They built the military machine that would eventually conquer the Mediterranean.
It ultimately conquered the Celts themselves, under figures like Caesar.
Exactly. The memory of the Aelia and the sack of Rome drove much of that military evolution. They were determined never to let it happen again. So ironically, the people who dealt Rome its most stinging defeat also, unintentionally, pushed them towards becoming the superpower that would eventually overwhelm them.
So wrapping this up, our deep dive has really challenged that old barbarian stereotype. We've seen the Celts as masters of iron, creators of terrifying psychological tools like the Carnix.
And as organizers of vast economic networks, centered on places like Hallstatt with its industrial-scale mining and powerful trade hubs like Heuneburg.
And that amazing story of the Heuneburg princess, proving through science that local elites had the power and wealth to import the most fashionable luxury goods from across the ancient world. She didn't need to be foreign. Her society was connected.
Absolutely. It paints a picture of a complex, dynamic, technologically advanced, and economically powerful culture that dominated much of Europe.
And then we end back at Rome. The ashes, the gold, the sword on the scale, Vae Victis. It's clear this trauma didn't crush Rome, it forged it.
It absolutely did. Which leaves us with a provocative thought for you, the listener. We know Rome recovered, reformed, and eventually conquered the Celts and much of the world. But could they have ever become that relentless globe-spanning empire without this initial terrifying shock? Without the humiliation inflicted by Brennus, forcing them to ditch the farmer-soldier model and build a professional military machine? Could the road to Roman Empire have started anywhere else but in the ashes left by the Celts?